Hello again. So recently I had a reason to look up the words to Pop Goes the Weasel. Not going to go into that, but of course, you look up the words of something and all sorts of other things pop up, among with the origin of Pop Goes the Weasel. What does this mean? I saw several different theories. Um, some of them had some stuff to back it up, information to back them up. Others not so much. So just thought I'd little speculation on this. My own theories based on what I read and what makes sense. Didn't find anything exact or anything definite. Let's say. So I'm not going to say this is definitely where it came from. I am going to say though, this is reasonable speculation. So to start with, there was yarn making. There was what was called a yarn weasel or yarn wheel. Don't know why it was called a weasel. Maybe it sounds like wheel, so people started calling it that. And so that would have like basically it was a wheel, 6 pegs. So it's basically the yarn's wound around in a hexagon. The pegs are a certain distance apart. So many turns of the wheel would be so many yards of yarn. And you would basically wrap your yarn around this, and then you would wrap them around a skein, and you'd let this unravel. And there was a gear on it. And with each turn, it pulled back this little lathe of wood. And then when it gets so far, the wood snaps back. It supposedly hits against the side of it, and that made a popping noise. Now, anyone who slaps something with a ruler knows that it doesn't really pop like that. But they say this is where it came from. The idea was basically so many turns of the wheel, it makes this sound, you know to stop doing it, and you have so many yards of wheel on your, or so many yards of yarn on your skein. And so, if you're selling 50 yards of yarn, then you know how much you have and you aren't shortchanging people. And so that's one possibility. Now, how did that get associated with the song? I don't know. And so I'm going to look at some other possibilities here. So found out some interesting things here. First off, the song or the music is similar to a song called The Haymakers, or basically a jig from the 1700s. Some people say it might go as far back as the 1600s because similar music was popular back in the 1600s, but the farthest back we can go with this particular piece is the 1700s. The first association of the music with the words was done in Baltimore by two guys. What were their names? Miller and Beecham. And they published in 1853, they published Pop Goes the Weasel with words and music that we associate with it. 1852, a year before this, there was a dance called Pop Goes the Weasel in England. Excuse me. And so this was basically a folk dance. We know 1852 because there were actually newspapers which advertised, people put newspaper advertisements saying, we'll teach you how to do the Pop Goes the Weasel dance. So we've got, at least 2 ads from newspapers offering to teach you Pop Goes the Weasel. Now, some people think this was from what we know about it, this was a dance, like I said, it was similar to a folk dance. For some reason, it was popular enough that, it was popular enough that people were able to teach classes in it. And apparently at one point, people would be lined up in 2 lines, and someone would be holding hands, and they'd move forward, and the others would come forward, and they'd go under their arms. And so some people think that And when they went under, they said "Pop Goes the Weasel" for some reason. Again, why they did this, don't know. But some people suggest that that's just a weasel will pop his head up when he gets curious, and so that's what they were doing. They're going under, "Pop goes the weasel." Um, so some people think that's where it comes from. I do know. Also in 1852, in the Durham Regatta, there was a boat named "Pop Goes the Weasel" registered in the Durham Regatta. So the term "Pop Goes the Weasel" was popular in England at that time. So whether that was named after the song, or whether that was named after the dance, or whether something else, the boat was named after something else completely, I don't know. But that just makes the mystery even more weird. So, what else do we have? Now, another suggestion is this comes from Cockney rhyming slang. And to pop something, 1850s slang was to take it to the pawn shop. So pawning something was considered popping it. So rhyming slang, I'm assuming, pawn shop would be pop. Problem with this theory is looked up Cockney rhyming slang and couldn't find anything for pop or pawn shop. So it might have been slang. It wasn't necessarily Cockney rhyming slang, although Cockney rhyming slang was popular at the time. Actually grew in the early 1800s. Would make some sense because the slang arose basically for criminals to use. Didn't want people to know you were planning stuff, or you wanted to talk about doing a job and didn't want anyone to overhear it. So they made up this slang for it. And so if pop stood for pawn shop, then yeah, we are going to steal stuff, we're going to get rid of it. That would make some sense. People try to drag other rhyming slang into it, which we'll get to later. See, one problem with this is while Cockney rhyming slang started in the early 1800s, it wasn't like a complete list of stuff. It got added to over time, so even up until the 20th century, stuff was being added to it. So we can't say there was a definitive list of Cockney rhyming slang from the 1850s. There are some words that we can probably trace back there, but not all of them. So, back to this pawning thing. Pawning actually makes sense if you look at the words of the song. Half a pound of twopenny race, half a pound of treacle, that's the way the money goes, pop goes the weasel. So that's the way the money goes. So people are spending money, they need money, they pop the weasel to get more money. So the song's obviously about spending money. Up and down the city road, in and out the Eagle, that's the way the money goes, pop goes the weasel. And the Eagle was a bar in London, and so, or a tavern, pub, whatever. So people are, again, spending money. If you spend money, you gotta get money, and to get money, perhaps people are pawning stuff. So where does the weasel come in? I mean, is this just something, Pop Goes the Weasel was an expression based on something else, and we're talking about pawning stuff, so why not just say Pop Goes the Weasel? There is one, Cockney rhyming slang. There is weasel and stoat, which means coat. And so, in very desperate times, people would have to pawn their clothing sometimes, and so some people have suggested this is it. And this goes back to what I said about slang not existing all the time is, whilst people have made that suggestion, other people have pointed out that the earliest reference to weasel and stoat we know about it comes from the 1930s. So it's possible that that's a newer phrase and so it had nothing to do with the song. Don't know for sure yet. Could have still had something to do with the song. Like I said, just because we don't have it in writing since before then doesn't mean it didn't exist. In the same way, just because the haymakers, the earliest version we know is from 1700s, doesn't mean that it didn't exist back in the 1600s like some people believe. So, still a possibility. Now, where does the monkey come in on this? So, got to thinking about this. Okay, monkey on your back. Maybe this person's addicted to something. He needs money, so he has to pawn his stuff to get money for his addiction. Looked up monkey on your back, and earliest reference I could find to that comes from the 1860s, so 10 years after the song was written. And even then, that was referring to people being angry or someone having a temper. It didn't start to get used to refer to an addiction until late 1900s, early late 1800s, early 1900s. So probably not that. Um, England was trading with India, eventually going to start colonizing it. The Raj rule was going to start in this approximate time. Uh, the Indian banknotes had pictures of animals on them. And so we started to refer to, or the English started to refer to so many pounds based on what the picture looked like on the money. So the 20 rupee note had a pony on it, so 20 pounds pony became slang for 20 pounds. The monkey was on the 500 rupee note. So a monkey in English slang can mean 500 pounds. Awful lot for pawning, especially if you consider that back in the 1850s, 500 pounds was about equivalent to 50,000 pounds in today's money. So that doesn't sound possible unless it's talking about very rich people. Now, back in the early 1800s, Industrial Revolution's coming up. Landowners, agriculture was on the outs. England was importing food, and people who would work for farms were starting to go to the cities to look for jobs because the Industrial Revolution was going on, and a lot of aristocrats started going into debt. So, by 50,000 pounds, just selling stuff off. So it is possible this was actually making fun of the rich people who were going into debt. So then a monkey would be 50,000 pounds. Pop Goes the Weasel. You had to sell stuff because you got to pay taxes on your land and you're not able to grow stuff on it. It would take like an economic historian to really flesh that theory out, but makes sense. Could work. Could be referring to one specific person. I tried to look up individual aristocrats who went into debt and couldn't really get a good list of people at the time. Again, economic historian might be able to say, hey, the song's talking about this guy here, but I can't do that. That's one theory I'll put forward, even though it could be completely right. I had to draw several different sources to get there. So why the cobbler's bench? All around the cobbler's bench, the monkey chased the weasel. The monkey thought it was such fun. Pop goes the weasel. Why the cobbler's bench? Back to Cockney rhyming slang. Cobbler means nothing, or it means nonsense, basically. Cobbler's alls means balls, which is slang for nonsense. That makes no sense, except for pawn shops in England. Their symbol is basically like three balls hanging from a stick. There'll be like a stick, and there'll be like three. So, was the cobbler's bench slang for a pawn shop at any point in time? And I couldn't find any reference to it, but at the same time, it sort of fits. And, maybe it was something it started as slang and then never caught on, so never got put in print anywhere. So that's a possibility. I'm going to throw that out as a possibility. Not going to say it's really what happened because, again, don't know for sure. That's my speculation. as a possibility only. Again, that's something someone else who knows more about English history and English slang in the times might look back and say, hey, that makes perfect sense. But we don't know about that. Um, I also considered the possibility cobbler sounds like gambler. So maybe the cobbler's bench was the gambler's bench. This is the betting office. That would make sense. People have to pawn stuff in order to go to the betting office. Um, in that case, I considered what about weasel races, which apparently were never a thing, but ferret races were. Well, ferret racing started in the United States in the mid 1900s and got popular in England in the 1970s. So that's not quite it. But people did go hunting with ferrets. And that goes back as far back. There is a picture, a painting of Queen Elizabeth I with one of her pet ferrets. So considering people were using ferrets to go hunting, and man will bet on just about anything. So it's possible that betting on ferrets or betting on weasels was a thing at one point. In which case, Pop Goes the Weasel could be referring to pawning stuff in order to place a bet on a weasel race. That's again speculation. I have nothing to prove that with, but sort of based on what you can find out, it's not it's not impossible. It's not probable, but it's not impossible. That's pretty much it. Like I said, saw two or three theories. I thought I'd look down and look at each of them, and as I looked at them, I came up with my own theories. Thought I'd share that. Maybe someone will just watch this and say, "Hey, that's something." I'm an actual historian. I can actually look up this stuff and prove it right or wrong, or laugh at the stupid American talking about Pop Goes the Weasel while he paints. But that's it. Have a nice day and pop.